afternoon, everybody. It's time for tea, except that I forgot my teacup. No, actually, I brought my little ones. So we have a teacup, and I'm ready to do some talking. This morning, before I got really into coming in today, I started to walk around my garden just to admire the flowers and the peonies. Oh my goodness, they're fragrant. You can smell them. They're awesome. And I was also looking at some of the chores that I've neglected dreadfully. And I am a big fan of miniature roses. And so on my deck, on a little shelf that I have on the side of the deck, I have roses, miniature roses in pots. And one of my favorites was a gift from my friend Vern. And it's a beautiful yellow rose, and every single flower is engaged now. They're fully open. And if I don't take them off, they're going to not flower again. So I'm going to take the first, obviously, dead one out. But the thing, I don't know if everybody knows this, but if you go down to where there are 5 leaves and cut there, it will more readily form a flower rather than just the traditional deadheading and just leaving 3 leaves or 2 leaves. It's 5 leaves, and if you can get down to 5 leaves and give it a good pruning and a good tidy up, we're set to go. And one of the things that I also did this past little while was I went into our garden out at the back, our vegetable garden that was planted for the square foot garden. And I think that the Horticultural Society is going to win a prize for the biggest radish I've ever seen growing in a garden. Now, I don't know about how big your radishes are, but I don't think they're quite as big as ours. And this is just cherry bell, just the regular cherry bell radish. It's quite a good size. I mean, palm of my hand, and it fills the entire palm. And they are scrumptious. They're really flavorful this year. I'm not sure if it's our compost or what it is, but they are gorgeous. So I'm going to have another one for dinner tonight because it was like having a whole meal on itself. So I'm looking and I'm going, well, those are some things we could be doing. And I have noticed some questions. So I'm going to talk about one right away. Speaking of being in the radishes, I'm looking at a big radish. And the reason I'm looking at it is it's an icicle radish, which is one of the longer ones, and they're really cool. And it's bolted, and you can see that it's flowering and that it's pushing a lot of flower. So big fat stems. So here again, boy, are we growing some big radishes in that back garden. But big stem, very tree-like. And when you see it flowering, you will see where it's related to broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage because it gets the same flowers, which brings me to when the leaves are juvenile, they're edible. So there's some things that I'm doing. Do we have any questions, Deb, or are we ready for questions yet?
We do have some questions. So this one says, we just had our garden beds ripped up and we're ready to plant. However, between being sick and the rain, I have now many dozens of spiky dandelion looking things. None have gotten to the flower stage. How do I get rid of them? I'm not sure I have the stamina to pull them out, or will that just create more?
Well, you should pull them out, and you should definitely get them before they go to the seed stage. The flowering stage is all well and good, but you do have to make that decision to pull them. Now, sometimes it's just as easy with the soil nice and wet the way it is to just gently loosen them, and then use your hoe and loosen the soil all through it, and then go back at the second go around and pull them all up, and that should get them. And frankly, they probably have a long root system just like a dandelion because they are a relative. As I'm chatting, I'm trying to remember, I know it's dragon's beard or lion's beard, one of the two, but they are painful once you get them established. So you do want to deal with them. So I hope that helps you a little bit. I don't want to recommend a chemical spray because that you still have to pull them out after they die anyway. Now, I'm not sure if the sound has improved, Deb. Has the sound turned up? I can't.
I tried. We might just need to pull that microphone closer.
Okay, do you want me to pull it closer and
Yes,
see what I can get? The microphone being closer help anything? Has that improved it any, or has the sound turned itself down even on the microphone?
We have thumbs up now.
Oh, perfect. We're getting there. You see, it's all a question of trial and error. You wouldn't come to tea with me without it having a little bit of a trial and a little bit of error. So have we got any other questions?
Yes, there's a part 2 to this.
Okay.
Is it too late to plant hydrangeas if I can find them?
If you can find them, there's absolutely no reason why you can't plant a hydrangea. Just make sure that that has a good established root system and make sure it's watered well, although with the rain that we've been having, I don't think that's a big issue.
And then we have here, Suzanne is asking, what vegetables can I plant now for a late harvest?
Well, in particular, I look at doing a second seeding right now, and I actually just reseeded some beans again this week, and I have about 2 new sets of radishes going in. I actually seeded some carrots about 3 weeks ago, and I'm not sure if you can see, I was really tickled that they had as much green on the bottom and that they have little roots already, and these are only 3 weeks seeded. So that's pretty good. I think that I'm going to have a good second and third row of carrots. The older carrots that I seeded about 5 weeks ago, I would have pulled them up and brought them, but I ate them all. So all I have left are these ones, but they are really still, when they're tiny like this, they're tasty, and the juvenile leaves are great. The trick that I used was I did a board along the row, and that kept them in the dark till they were up a bit, and that seemed to push them a little better. You can do beans, you can do spinach, you can do chard. It's still not hot enough to affect those guys. And honestly, there's no reason why you couldn't do a second seeding of almost everything except for the big crops like tomatoes or peppers. But read your labels. The labels will tell you on the seed packets 30 days to maturity, 60 days to maturity. And you're looking at the ones that will germinate and survive our heat wave. That we're going to get a heat wave, right? We're going to get a heat wave, and they'll survive all of that as well.
So similar to that, we have, what can I plant in my bed after I've harvested my garlic?
Well, my first answer are peas, bush peas, and the reason being is that garlic tends to take a lot of energy up into its leaves, and then it's a root crop. So it uses up a lot of the natural nitrogen in the soil. So I plant peas because it seems to help develop a better bond with the soil. And I grow bush peas, not the tall ones. Get Little Marvel or one of those, and they're great. And sugar peas and snap peas, and they have about a 60 to 70 day maturity on them. So you'll be getting, that's getting close.
Here's a related one.
Oh, is it time to cut the scapes off the garlic? Not quite, unless they have completely turned into a tight curl and the flower is just starting to open. Once you can see, as I say, the blue of the scape, as the flower opens and the scape breaks open, that's when you cut them off. And I would say that from looking at the garlic in the back garden, we're about a week away. So I would wait. Is it possible to eliminate spit bugs? I'm not sure if you've ever met a spit bug, but a spit bug appears on your plant and it's got this foam on it. And you don't think that there's anything. Why is it getting all foamy and it looks like a soap? And actually when you go to squeeze it, it feels very soapy. It's the little winged fly on the inside that's laying his eggs that's causing the foam because it's making it less attractive to the birds. I just go along and run a a pair of gloves. I'll take my gloves and wear them, and I go along and I pull them off and squish them, and I quite often squish and drop them on the ground and step on them for good insurance. But the best way is to do that, and do it regularly. Do it every day. You have to pay attention to how often you go out in the garden. But spit bugs, because it's been very wet, they're creating even more spits, so it's harder to see them, but work on them, because it'll take about, they are really active for about 14 days. Then they go to the caterpillar stage, and you want to get them before they go to that stage. So that you want to get that little guy off of there within the next 2 weeks. So just keep at it. It's almost a daily chore. Are there carrot seeds available somewhere right now? Well, funnily enough, I was in a garden center this morning and I saw carrot seeds there. I also was in the Italian supermarket on the weekend, and they had carrot seeds in their seed rack. I was surprised to find the seed rack, and they're Italian seeds, but those Italian seeds used to be part of the Mackenzie seed line, and they're still doing them. I had no idea, but they had carrots there, and you can find them and use them. And I noticed that a lot of the seed racks in some of the garden centers are getting replenished, so just keep checking. Oh, and the co-op had almost a complete rack of Mackenzie seeds this morning, so you could probably take a look there. All right.
I have one over here.
Yes?
After some hail and a few days of rain, the petunia plants look awful. What is the best solution to restore them?
Pinching them right back into the next, where the flowers are looking a little bit mashed up and everything. You're going to cut back, and don't go just down to where the leaves join the stem on the first set. Go down to the second set, and then just give them a fertilizer, and they should be fine. It should bring them back. I have found that the last 2 weeks ago I got hail, so I have introduced hail suppression devices into my garden, and I am I pinched all my petunias back, and I noticed they're starting to fill in, and the scarring on the leaves isn't as bad. So the best thing is to not just go to the first set of leaves, go down to the second set and pinch them out. Okay. My mock orange were pruned last year and have grown 3 feet so far. Can I cut it back to where they were pruned? Yes, but if they've only grown that this year, they should be fine. They'll still come with a bit of flowering, and that'll get them to toughen up and grow stronger stems. I have found snails in my garden. Is that a problem? They can do as much damage as a slug. And if they get established, they can get quite vigorous. And the best thing to do with them is to pick them. They, unlike slugs, I haven't found anything that attracts them or kills them particularly. So I would be a little bit leery of that.
And then this question is, do you know what type of poppies are planted in the median of Memorial Drive?
They're called ladybird poppies, and they truly are the poppies of Flanders Fields. But you will find them in most of the packaging labels call them ladybird poppies, and they literally have a bright red flower with black dots in the center. But they are the poppies of Flanders Fields. Okay, I see. What do you recommend doing with spinach once it has gone to seed? I start picking it. I find, Nicole, that the best thing to do is to cut that out, the bolting, and it will start to branch from there. But if you don't have any success with it, it's not too late to do more succession seeding. And I personally grow either King of Denmark or Long-Standing Bloomsdale because they don't bolt as quickly. What are hail suppression devices? Well, I bought umbrellas. I went over to the little Dollarama at my place, and I bought $3 umbrellas. My friend Dave cut the curved part of the handle off, and I just stick them into the pots. I've done it for my tomatoes. I did it for my succulents, which took a terrible beating in that first thrashing of hail. So now I have umbrellas for my garden again. I used to do it years and years ago, and then I stopped doing it because I wasn't as fussed. But after they beat up my precious succulents, me and the hail went to war. So it is one of those things. But anyway, I really and truly, the umbrellas have worked like a darn. The other thing that I found, I wish I'd brought them. I never thought to bring them. I found at Dollarama in their outdoor games and play area for kids and stuff, they had these long stakes, and you twirl them in, they auger into place, and I'm able to put them, they've got a screw on top, and I put golf umbrellas in those and put them in my raised vegetable garden, and it's worked like a darn. It has actually helped to shade one part of my garden that got a little too sunny. But my kohlrabi has all come back and it isn't thrashed anymore. So that's what I've been doing. If I can think of it, I will post a picture of the umbrellas and the little auger thing on Facebook for you. But anyway, those are my hail suppression devices at this point in time. My husband used to get annoyed at me because I'd send the kids out to put umbrellas on the garden, and he said, yep, send them out in the electric storm with steel rods. You have to be a little bit kinder than that. But I hope that helps you with my terminology is such that I have to question myself some days. But I thought hail suppression devices was great. I noticed, this morning I was over at Spruce It Up, and then I was at Greengate, and I was just kind of looking around because I was looking for plant material to look at and just to see what I could maybe replace a couple of my chewed up, bashed up plant material. I noticed that there were quite a few interesting things in, not particularly things we're always looking for, but you know what I saw? I saw a yellow geranium. I mean, honest to goodness, I saw a yellow geranium. They aren't as tall. They're about this tall, but they had yellow flowers. They actually had yellow flowers. So I was quite excited to see them. And I looked at them, and then I walked away to do what I had to do at the garden center. And when I came back, there had been 3 on the shelf, but they were gone. But I talked to them, and they were just getting a new truck in, and there were more on the truck. So do take a check. But the other thing I found were platycodon, which is the balloon flower, and they had the pale pink one, which I just think is so pretty. And they just looked so nice, and they don't mind a bit of shade. So I'm going to put them in a couple of the pots where, unfortunately, the hail took out a couple of my trailing plants. So I'm just going to fill them in. But the platycodon is a perennial. So I'm going to try it and see how it does in my garden as well. And then I couldn't find a big enough one, but I found a Lisianthus. And I don't know if you've ever met them, but they have this double dark blue flower. It's gorgeous. And they start out with this pale lavender bud. So I did do a little snooping in the garden center. I also admit to going into the perennial lot. And I did have a look around, and they had some interesting things at Greengate. So I'm quite excited to say that I didn't spend money in the perennial lot yet, but that was also because they said they were getting another truck in. So I want to have the full meal experience. So I'm going to go back and look at more stuff. Anyway, yes, this is the balloon flower. Isn't that beautiful? They had the blue one as well as this pink one. So I was torn, but I thought the pinky white was just gorgeous. So something when you're thinking you're going to go shopping, that's what I'm looking for, is just a little something that flowers right now. Because sometimes your perennial garden gets a little behind because you bought everything early in the season, or you bought it and it just isn't flowering in sequence the way it should be. So I'm always looking for stuff to add at this point.
In Inglewood, there's some planters behind where the Etsy gallery is.
Oh, the Etsy, yes.
And they have balloon flowers in it. And the first time I saw it was quite striking because they weren't open yet, so
They're like balloons.
They look just like little balloons on a stem, and then they open up. Like
Yeah, and they're real, and the kids love them. They think they're just gorgeous. Okay, I see a question here. Both my pear tree and ornamental crab has leaves that are turning yellow. Is this due to the cold rain, or are you looking at more of a fungal problem like apple scab? The trick is to go in and look closely at the branches. I have seen a great deal of scab on the apples and the crabs this year, and literally along the branching there'll be black sooty mold almost, and you can tell that it's the scale. And what happens is, as they're eating the bark on your tree, they're creating this sooty mold, which is sticky, and it's their other method of protecting themselves. Plus, what you will see is that the branches themselves become desiccated looking and have a two-tone to them. And after a while, after being infested for a while, the bark will start to split away. Unfortunately, there's nothing that can be sprayed at this time of year. But by pruning out some of the badly infected branches, you will get rid of some of it. But what I would suggest is you do that. And then, honestly, I have had a great deal of success by spraying dormant spray, the dormant spray kit. I spray it in the fall as soon as the leaves are off. And then in the spring, just before the leaves come out, I spray the trunk and all through it. And it has helped. Unfortunately, the scab that's on there, it's hard to get rid of. Anyway, what are your tips for ants in the flower beds? Well, we posted a video of an ant hotel, and that's probably one of my favorite things to do is to get a big pot and fill it with soil, and you just put it over top of the anthill, and the ants start to colonize into it. And what I do with them is I take them and wait for about 2 weeks, maybe 3, depends on how big your pot is. And when you start to see them coming out of the holes in the top of the pot, wait for Black Bin Day. Don't do this until Black Bin Day. And you take it and you put it in your black bin, because actually the dump needs aeration just as much as anybody else. So they can go to the dump and live there. So keep removing them. I've now successfully, touch wood, eliminated them from beside my driveway. However, I found a new colony in the backyard that I'm working on. So, and you might see on our Facebook page a picture of an ant hotel in a bed of thyme, and it seemed to have attracted a lot of action. So watch for the coming weeks for the results. Okay, this year I planted a 15-gallon ivory silk tree lilac. Oh, where'd it go? Okay. In a newly landscaped yard, which is now sitting in a low wet spot, can I save it from drowning in the spot, or should I consider moving it to another place in the yard as it's not yet? I would move it to higher ground. They don't like to have their feet soaking wet. One of the reasons that ivory silk do so well here is they like to be up a little bit higher, and they don't want to be saturated. And no matter what, your low spot's always going to stay a little bit wet. My favorite tree, ivory silk tree lilac. And they are right now, they're in full flower. I read somewhere that someone was calling it a false lilac. No, it is a syringa, it is a lilac, and what I love about it is that lovely colored bark with the striation in it. But yes, you can move it. Consider moving it now. Don't dig too close to the trunk, lift it out to where you thought the size of the pot, and refertilize the root system when you put it, move it. Okay. Oops. Is there anything we can do to help our trees at this time of year? The leaves of my crab apples are sparse and small, lots of little fruit though. They're putting a lot of energy into their fruit. There is a product on the market that I have used for a couple of, about a long time anyway, Alaska More Bloom, which is the fish fertilizer base, but it's 0-10-10. And what you do is you spray the trunk with it, and it will help to get it to take up nutrients and help for the leaves to develop a little more. I have had a great deal of success with that. The other thing that I have been reading up on, there's a really interesting article on Kew Gardens website about aerating your trees when they're too wet. And they recommend going around with a fork out at the drip line and loosening the soil so that you can get air circulation in. And so when you do the fork thing, go in the full depth of the fork and rock it back and forth and go all the way around and do aerate it. They discovered that after a big windstorm in England, and the Turner oak fell down. And the Turner oak is 700 years old. They couldn't bring themselves to chop it apart and throw it away. So they took a crane and they raised it up, and the 15 years after the big windstorm, it's doing twice as well. And they decided that it was something to do with aeration. So with all this saturated soil we have and the heavy clay, loosen with a fork, aerate, and use that Alaska moorbloom. I really like it. I do it usually mid-season, about now, just to get some strength in my fruit-bearing trees. And then again in the fall, just after they drop leaves, because there's no first number in there. So what it's working on is getting the root system functioning again and getting the circulation working. Sort of like iron. Anyway, all right. My peonies are not blooming. Any advice? Do they have any buds at all? If they have no buds, they're not going to bloom this year. But if the buds are there and they're staying hard and tight, they might just be that you've got too much mulch around the bottom, or that they are just way too wet and too crowded, and they may not have been divided. But if they're juvenile and fairly young, they tend to harden their bud off, and they don't want to form a bud. I don't want to create a mess.
We do have a response. Yes, there are buds.
There are buds. Now, are they hard? Are the ants crawling around on them? Are they sticky? Because what you want to make sure is when you run your hand into the bud, it should feel sticky. And I literally just took my hand away and it's sticky like honeydew. And that's usually that they are just getting ready to open. If they're not sticky, what I would gently do is just run your thumb over them and loosen them a bit, and that will do it. But if that doesn't work, you might have to cut them off and put them in a vase and force them to open that way. But don't leave them too long, because otherwise they'll form into little hard bullets, and that will bring a disease.
We have, yes, they are sticky.
Oh, good. Well, then they still have time. They will come. Everything is about 2 to 3. By rights, these peonies should have opened and have been done 3 weeks ago, 2 to 3 weeks ago. We've had a bit of warmth. We're getting a little more action and activity. So now what'll happen now that they're sticky is the bees will be attracted, the ants will come, and then they will help them to keep going. All right. So which tomato fertilizer do you use? There seems to be quite a range of number sequences. I use the fertilizer with the middle number that's around 25, 30, and there's one from the Schultz company that I do like, and it is, I believe it's, I think it's 14, 25, 14. But what you want to look for is a way to get the fertilizer to move up into the plant. Tomato plants don't take up fertilizer if they're too dry. So always remember that to fertilize them when they have moisture in them. The other thing that I use is I do a compost tea with worm castings, and I use that quite regularly in the soil. It just seems to help to push the nutrients up into the plant. But 142916 is the one that has been my most successful. All right. Why some of my sunflowers have curly leaves which seem are in good shape? Are they twirling into themselves? Are they curling upward? Some of the sunflowers are just getting way too much moisture. I keep blaming it on that, but that's part of it. But if they're curling and twirling inward, they are probably just a little too wet, plus have they been fertilized? And that's where you might want to put some fresh compost around them. My friend grows sunflowers, and he always grows the biggest and best ones, and he uses just 15-30-15 fertilizer, and it seems to push them quite well. He calls his gardening day that he does fertilizer is Fertilizer Friday, And on Fertilizer Friday, there's always quite an array of things out in the garden that he's fertilizing with. So,
So would the curling leaves be similar for tomatoes?
well, tomatoes have curling leaves. Lately, I've been seeing curly leaf virus, which is at the very top. But if tomato leaves cup upwards, that's a fertilizer issue for sure. If they cup down and in, they're too wet. But yes, curling leaves, the leaves are their way of expressing. It's how they talk to us. Salted snow was shoveled into my shrubs beside the sidewalk last March. I tried to shovel it out, but have seen a lot of winter kill in the roses and astilbe. I know there was a lot of winter kill last winter, but could this also be caused by the salt? Oh, I see more. Is there anything I can do to amend the soil? Probably. This is the best thing because I get the same issue no matter how many ways you instruct about salt on your driveway and your road. You're still going to get the odd guy shoveling into the garden. Every spring I add fresh compost, but one of the other things that I've had a great deal of success doing is making my compost tea and using it on a fairly regular basis. And here again, getting in there with my trowel and loosening the soil up, because salt tends to pack our soil and turn it into a bit of concrete. So you want to get in there and loosen it as much as you can. You will find that the shrubs are really tight, so maybe not using just a hoe, just go in there with a 3-prong cultivator or something and just loosen around. Compost or compost tea would help it a lot. I do my own compost tea with worm castings. The worm castings I can usually buy at the garden center. They have several brands and it will say on the label worm castings. And I mix my own little package deal. I usually go 4 cups of worm castings to about 5 liters of water, and I mix it and let it steep for about, probably at least 2 days, and then I go around and I water the soil very, very thoroughly. Ooh, was there a shortage? No, not that I saw. In fact, I saw some at Bluegrass, and I also saw some, where was I today? I saw some at Spruce It Up as well. Might check though, because I know that they were having a little trouble, but there was a shortage of plant material in general. But I did find rosemary at most of the major garden centers, and in the last 2 weeks I found some. Worms are building their cocoons in my tomato leaves. Any recommendations to kill them or keep them? What kind of worms? Are they little green worms? Are they teeny tiny worms? They usually, worms or caterpillars are usually a sign of they're a moth or a butterfly. And the best thing I would do is pick the leaves that they're badly infesting and get rid of them, because you really don't want them to keep going, because then they'll hatch into the moth and you could have another life cycle and get more caterpillars going on. Is there any more?
Oh, I have one here.
Oh, all right.
So this comes from someone who is growing some vegetable plants in a pot.
Vegetable plants in a pot, yes.
And on the soil, there formed a white fuzz, and they weren't sure if it was fungal or what it might be. Like, why would there be a white kind of fuzz?
The white fuzz is usually an indication that there's no air circulation in the pots, and then there's no proper drainage. And the best thing is cultivation, and I really am a big fan of putting in horticulture. If it's a sealed unit and there's no drainage, that can be the issue. But cultivating, loosening, getting air circulating, and if that persists, I usually recommend that you get some horticultural charcoal and mix it in. For that matter, go to the pet store and buy aquarium charcoal and mix a bit into the topsoil, and that'll help with the aeration problem in your pots and in your containers of vegetables, because that is quite often something that will happen to them. I don't, honestly, it depends on how, if the containers are a sealed unit or not. but the white fungus is just a dry, it's been because it's been so wet, and then it's been cool, and the fungus just grows on the soil. And was it new soil or old soil? Because old soil will sometimes form a fungal layer on it as well. So that is sometimes the biggest issue.
Okay, that's all the questions on my list at the moment.
Okay. Well, I've been deadheading out front before I came in. So I was deadheading some of the plants out front. I found a spit bug on this one, which I wasn't real happy about. But these are Veronicas from the front. And by pruning them, I'm going to get pruning or cutting or deadheading. I'm going to get more flowers on these plants because we still have 6 weeks and these will flower again. But the other thing that I'm going to do is keep them in a vase because the seed heads have matured. So there's already some that have popped out. But what I'm trying for is to get a package of seeds because this is a particularly pretty color of Veronica. It's pink, and they aren't ripe enough yet. They're still a little green, so I'll stand them in a vase and keep them going because I want to get seed heads off of them. And
so that'll be just a dry vase?
This will be a dry vase. I won't put any water in it. I'll keep it on the dry side, right, just standing upright. I like to keep them standing upright so I can sort of watch them mature. Because then, and I will quite often put a big piece of white paper towel. And the reason I put the paper towel down is because the paper towel is a little bit rough and it'll hold the seeds in place and I won't lose them. Because if you pick up a shiny piece of white paper, they'll just all flip off. So I don't want to have that happen. So I will do it that way. And then I found this out in the garden and it had gone to seed. And I'm quite interested in the way that these seed heads are forming. They're like little spiders and they're very interesting. But they're not quite ripe enough because they don't just drop away. But the interesting thing is when I rub my hand on it, I can feel the hook on the end of the seed head. So that means that these are meant to drop to the ground and catch themselves in the soil. So just another one of those ones that I will keep, and I'm going to see what it's going to do and how it'll seed itself. And if I forget and they drop on the paper towel, they will quite often hook into the paper towel, and I just tear the paper towel apart and seed them that way. That way they get enough moisture. So just some things that when you're out exploring in the garden, those are things you can do. Okay. When is a good time to take or start tender salvia cuttings? Also, would a cutting of Stachys hildago grow best in water or soil? Okay, let's start with the salvia cuttings. I wouldn't do them right yet. I'd wait about another 10 days or so. They take about 6 to 8 weeks to germinate or to root. So if you're going to take them, I would wait 10 days or so because what they want is to get them to root, cuttings to root in this particular time of year. They want a shorter, they want their day length to shorten. So they usually they'll root best when the day is 14, like 10 hours of daylight, 14 hours of darkness, and they root best that way. And the other thing about rooting salvia is that it does like to be somewhere where it will stay warm, but the roots have to be warm enough. So if you're going to start them and this summer continues, I would start them indoors where the roots can stay warm and where you can get the day length just the right way. Now, would a cutting of Stachys hildago grow best in water or soil? Best in soil. And the trick is to get the bottom 2 leaves off the Stachys, and you will see off the main stem almost a knuckle, and they root best from that knuckle. And I have seen when they get rooted at the garden center, at the grower, they put a toothpick in beside it to keep it upright so it doesn't fall into each other. And sometimes they'll do 2 toothpicks. It's quite a process. And they dip them in. They don't force the stem itself. They're going to take a tool and put it in, put the stem in, and then prop it up with the toothpicks. And you'll get better results in soil than water. Is the Alaska More Bloom a good fertilizer for new transplant trees in the first year? No, not really. What you're looking for more is that high middle number for the fertilizers for the first year. However, if you did your new trees and you planted them with mics, that the root fertilizer, the root rhizome, you're not going to want to fertilize it for the first year anyway, because you want that nice bacteria and everything to build up and build good roots that way, and then next spring go back at it. But that high middle number is hard on the mics. When adding compost to soil, it is better to dig in or simply place on top. At this time of year, I like to just place it on top, and I'll add about an inch, 2 inches in the springtime, and then over the season, I'll just do it like I'm just sort of going around and I see something that's not looking great. I'll put some soil on the top, and then it will work itself in. And then in the fall, I add more compost. Our gardens are just like our roads. They erode, they get potholes, and they need to have it topped up with fresh compost. And gradually, the fresh compost becomes a part of the natural cycle of our soils. Oh, my bonfire euphorbia looks quite tired. Should I cut it back or wait until fall? I would leave it till fall, and I wouldn't cut it too hard, because they are evergreen, and if you cut them back too hard, they won't come back. It's better to clean it up a little bit in the fall and give it a good tidy round. And when you're cutting it, all euphorbias bleed. No matter what time of year, they have that white sap that comes out. I would just cut what you want to cut off of it and even it out and get it started again. And then I would just lightly spray it down with cold water to stop the bleeding, and then it will take much easier. Okay, over the winter for the past few years, parts of my evergreen die. A Danica cedar and an Alberta spruce. Wow. I water and fertilize and hope Mother Nature brings it back. Should I burlap them in the winter? Okay, let's start with, you couldn't have picked two more difficult plants to overwinter. A Danica cedar is not hardy to our area, and it really will struggle desperately. Wrapping it in burlap will do it no good. Protecting it from the west wind and the hot sun might help, but it really and truly is the fact that our winter, our relative humidity can go down to 20%. They're used to perpetual moisture. Alberta spruces may be called an Alberta spruce, but they're not named because they're from Alberta. They were named in honor of Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's son. Now, or husband. And the Alberta spruce is not hardy here. Here it's another one that, yes, you might get 2 or 3 years out of it. It's a lovely cone-shaped dark green, but it really and truly needs humidity and rich soil. And here, if you're going to do anything, protect it from the west wind and protect it from the sun glaring off the snow and burning it. But really and truly, they're not meant to grow here.
So, like, wrapping it in burlap won't work, but if they were
if they were to create a windbreak, but wrapping it in burlap, because the plant itself continues to photosynthesize, because it's an evergreen, it will burn them, and they don't do well from that angle. Oh, is it possible to reroot a begonia if it breaks off? Absolutely. The magpies just destroyed my pendula begonia. The fledgling magpies are making desolation row in my back shade corner. But yes, wherever a leaf joins a stem, and they literally have very strong nodules, you can take them off and they will reroot quite easily, but you need to leave that ridge so that they can form roots off of them. They don't like to be too wet while they're rooting, so what you want to make sure you're doing is getting them to stand up quite easily. I carry a chopstick in my bag of tricks, because whenever I find plants that aren't broken off or pieces that are broken off, I will quite often, right into the pot where that they are growing in already, I will poke in a hole, push in the cutting and push around it, and they quite easily root again. And the begonia itself will probably start to regrow. But yes, it is possible to reroot them. My beet leaves are getting paper-like white patches on them. Any idea what's causing that? Can you see anything in the membrane between the leaves? They get leaf miner, and or they get a little bit of it's hard to put it this way, but edema. If they're too wet, they shed moisture out through their leaves, and then they will go a corky white with an edge around them. But 9 times out of 10, the paper-like white patches are usually leaf miner, and they eat their way out. Pull those leaves off, and you will get more leaves. Beets leaves, once you pick them, because a lot of people eat beet leaves off the top of their beets, just keep picking the bad ones off, and you'll gradually eliminate the population, and that will help. But really and truly, the leaf miner is hard to get rid of. I usually plant radishes in with my beets and spinach, etc., to prevent that. Our Miss Kim lilac bushes aren't producing very many blooms. Any idea why? Well, last fall was really tough, and it was hard on them. So what I usually have found is that they just didn't produce as many buds because they also went into the fall a little too dry and a little fast freeze, and they lost some of their buds. However, when did you prune it? Because Miss Kim's are like all lilacs. They spent all summer setting this coming year's blossoms. So the branches themselves this year will grow their leaves, and then they will set buds on them. But if you go in there in this week or in the next 2 or 3 weeks and start pruning at it, you will essentially cut off the flower buds that were going to come. So there's 2 reasons why they might not be. Okay. Any tips for pruning a somewhat overgrown juniper? Do it now, right away. The lilacs, especially the ivory silk lilac, is just producing its flowers. They're just on the edge of it. This is when you cut a juniper. The trick with junipers is they grow like a fan, and these leaves grow all in little segments. So you pull the fan apart and cut there. Don't go just straight across. You'll burn the tips off. So you want to open up the fan and prune them evenly, or go down to the next fan and prune them out. And don't leave the cut so that there's a bit of a divot in where the branches join the stem. Cut this way so that it's a bit of a slight slope, and there's no way that bacteria or dirt can build up in the crotch. But really and truly go in. It's a tedious job, and it's one that can't be hurried. You have to go in and hold the branches of the juniper up and prune as you go through it. And wear good gloves, and don't do it with short sleeves on. There's nothing worse than juniper burn, but that's what you have to do with them. Okay, what are your thoughts on Invincible, Ruby, Hydrangea, and Hope for Humanity Rose? I'm interested in growing both these plants. Okay, I'm going to go to Hope for Humanity. I remember when it was introduced, and we all thought, oh, beautiful rose. One of the problems that we do have with it is that it is prone to black spot. And if you're a novice, I would be a little careful of it, but I do like them. I think they're really, really a strong rose, but you have to go in and make sure that they are first pruned properly when you first plant them. And then in the fall, clean them up as best you can, but don't leave the stems too long. Don't shorten them too much, because otherwise they tend to die back completely and you fight a battle with them. Invincible has been around now for about 5 years that I've seen on the market. So what you're going to find is that Invincible will struggle a little bit, but it is a good one, but it likes a little bit more shade than sun than the others, and it loves moisture, so don't forget to water it and water it and water it. All right. I'm fighting black spot on Morden Centennial roses. I've used fungicide spray and removing effective leaves, but with all the rain, it seems counterproductive. Yes, it does. Any advice? How often should I spray? Really and truly, when it rains the way it does, it's very counterproductive to spraying them. The best thing you can do, and this is where my hail suppression devices come in, I try to protect them a little bit, and I tend to cut back the flowers a little more so that they get a chance to open up and get stronger leaves. But you should be spraying that fungicide about every 3 weeks, not any more than that. And you will probably win, but it's going to take a little bit of persistence on your part, plus the soil needs to be freshened up, and this is where you probably are going to either add some charcoal or some good compost to it to help the soil. But I hope that helps you a little bit, and I have found that that Centennial Rose tends to struggle a bit with black spots, so just you have to persist with it. And if you read up on it, I believe it has an alternate host that sometimes causes the problems, and I'm trying to think, I cannot think of the name of it, but there is alternate hosts that get the black spot as well. Oh, I know, viburnum gets black spot sometimes as well. So if you have a high bush cranberry nearby, you have to make a choice between keeping them close together or one of them has to move to another part of the garden. Okay, would a hydrangea perennial survive in Calgary's climate? Absolutely. We for years had Annabelle and PG, the two white hydrangeas, and they are hardy, they do well. Annabelle has these big fluffy flowers and they're gorgeous. They're the true mop head. They really do well. And so the PG is a flatter flower, which is really interesting with a slight pink tone to it. Both of those do well. Some of the newer ones that are out, Little Lamb, Pinky Winky is another one that I really like. A lot of them are doing very well, but they do like the moisture, and they do like to be a little bit careful about how they prune them. They flower best on new woods, so you don't prune them in the fall, you prune them and clean them up in the springtime, and then they come back and they produce their flowers. Oh, good. So no viburnums nearby for your roses. Good, Shirley. Well, that's good. I would just be really persistent with the spray and keep it on an even schedule for the next year, for this next season, and see how it does from there. And it should be all right. All right. So have we missed any questions?
I think we've got them so far.
So far. Okay. All right. Well, I might have to talk.
You wanted to talk about pruning a rose.
Well, I pruned it once, but let's talk about it again. When I went out in the garden this morning to try and find something to bring, I really like miniature roses, and they're one of my favorite things. I actually keep them in pots, but they are great. Miniature roses are hardy here, and they are on their own roots, so they can go out in the garden and be planted, and they just do beautifully. But yellow's one of my favorites. Now, the trick with pruning roses and getting them to reflower is when you're pruning them, you want to prune back to where there is a set of 5 leaves. And if you look, you can see 5 sets of leaves. And if you were to look under the rosebud where I just cut it, I didn't cut down in right first nodule. I went down another one because there's only 3 leaves here. 5s and 7s, and the rose will keep flowering. And I really, I look at my rose and I go, okay, well, I want to take it back and I want it to flower again as prolifically. So I'm just taking it back so I can get more flower heads. But I completely ignored it this past little while because it's been raining so much. And this is also an opportunity when I'm pruning to get in, because any kind of leaf spot on a rose, I'm going to pull off. I'm going to take it off. I don't want to fight that battle. But also because it's been raining so much and I keep it in a saucer, I noticed that I'm going to have to turn the saucer upside down so that it doesn't stand in all that moisture. Because see all that mud? That's because all the soil in the pot is being forced out the bottom of the pot. So I'm trying to eliminate that. But now's the time, you go out and you do a little bit of pruning and you do a little tidy round, and I should have lots and lots of flowers this coming time. And I found a double set. So something to watch for. It also gives me a chance, and you're going to go, oh my gosh, there's no flowers left, but I want more flowers, so I'm going to pick them. But I will take them home and put them in my little rose bowl. But these miniatures have always fascinated me, so do keep an eye out for them. And it really is quite an interesting pastime trying to prune and to keep things going on like this. Okay. Okay, I have a peach lemonade rose that still has no growth. It has been doing well for 2 years, but nothing this year. Do I give up on it? Well, they're not hardy here. So what I would do is, really and truly, I would just say it's not going to produce anything. It's not worth trying to keep it. And it might have been a grafted one, and it might be coming back on rootstock that doesn't flower. So I'd say you have to give up. I hate making tough decisions. All right. So I missed your reply to pruning my mock orange. Would you reply yes or no? I would prune it, yes. And I would do a little bit of pruning back to where it was pruned because it set all of its blooms on the old growth last year. So new growth this year has no blooms on it, but do it quick because it won't flower again if you don't do it. So can I put my mini rose in the ground? Absolutely. And they're amazing how they come back and gradually they fill in. Like this little yellow was one stem and now it's got many and it just keeps growing and I'm really enjoying it. I have another new one that was given to me called Pink Fairy and it's gorgeous. It just keeps getting these gorgeous bright pink flowers on it. I'm quite excited about it all. So I think we've run out of questions, haven't we?
One right here.
Oh, I made my own compost tea with grass clippings 3 days ago and think I will use it on my garden today. Do you think I can add to tomato, squash, first time experiment? Absolutely use it. It'll be really good for it. It should by now have a good solid warm smell to it, like it shouldn't smell pungent. And that's when you do it. Just don't put it on the foliage, just use it in the soil. All right.
And we have a comment here.
Oh,
my miniature roses are 5 years old and beautiful.
Absolutely. I love them. What is a hardy bush rose? We lost all our rose bushes this past year. Oh my goodness. Any of the Parkland series, anything that prefaces with Morden, any of the Hardy Explorer series, William Baffin, John Davis, John Cabot, and one of my personal favorite hardy roses is Blanc de Colbert. I was just bragging about how beautiful my Morden blush was today. All of those do really well. Hansa, all of the hardy shrub roses, those are the ones that you want to look for.
What do you think of the Hazel Dean?
Well, it's the one that flowers right now and everybody loves it. The thing that I find hard to take is that it's this gorgeous mass of beautiful yellow, but it's finished and then it's done. But I do like it. I mean, it's Persian yellow is another one that's yellow that flowers early. That's why I like Campfire, some of the new Canadian artist series. So I like those ones as well. All right.
We have, how do you overwinter a mini rose? Anything?
I don't do anything really special with them. I just get them in the ground and make sure they have good mulch around them. And I only prune them a little bit because I don't want the wind blasting them around. And I put them somewhere where I know they're not going to get snow piled too high on them. But they seem to do fine. And I now have 7. So I'm running out of room. But that's also the reason why some get lifted and put in pots, so that I can keep going with them.
Okay, that's the last of our questions.
Oh, we've used up all our questions and we've had a lovely time today, or at least I have. I hope you all have. I hope that we see you again next month. I'm sure that I will, and hopefully from here on in it's a long, hot summer and we're going to have sun and our vegetables will grow, and I hope your flowers smell as beautiful as these, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for looking in on us.
Bye now.
Bye.